The topic is political unrest in Africa, and the guest is Dr. LMadu3. Now, Dr. LMadu3, this is the final segment here, and let's give you an opportunity during this final segment to sort of bring things together in reference to Libya and talk about the United States, well, however you wish to deal with it.
Well, you know, with the UN passing a resolution today, you know, imposing a no-fly zone over Libya, probably the days of the Libyan regime is numbered. How long he's going to survive, you know, nobody knows. Gaddafi, at this moment, according to information, has about 3 of the major ethnic groups, supporting him. The others have defected. He's from the Gaddafi ethnic group. So his own group, the Gaddafi ethnic group, the Magraha ethnic group, the guy who bombed the Lockerbie plane.
Okay.
Abdel Basset El Magrahi.
He was part of that.
He's from the Magraha ethnic group.
That explains him.
Exactly, and that's part of the motivation to help him solidify the support from that ethnic group. And Major Abdel Salam Jaloud is also from the Magraha ethnic group, And so the Zuweya and the Misurata and the Obeidi and the most numerous ethnic group, the Wafala, have already defected to the other side. So that will tip the balance on how things happen on the ground, So with this imposition of no-fly zone and the sweeping wording of the resolution, it gives the UN authority even to send in ground troops if necessary. So the outcome right now is anybody's guess. Nobody knows what is going to happen. How does this affect the rest of the continent? If you look at the rest of Africa, almost 1/4, about 15 or so of their leaders have stayed over 20 years in power and also abusing their people more than even the colonel. It's not that most of it is not giving attention. In Equatorial Guinea, Obiang has been there since 1979. In fact, he came to power, by slaughtering his uncle. His uncle, Masias Nguema, almost slaughtered 1/4 of the population, drove the other 1/4 into exile, So when Obiang took over in 1979, he was the army general. Yeah, he slaughtered his own uncle and the rest to take over power. Since then, he's been in power. And to make matters worse, those who guard him are not even his own country's soldiers, but Moroccan troops, to make sure nobody overthrows him. Yeah, he hired Moroccan troops, to protect him. In Angola, President Dos Santos has been there since 1979, after the death of President Agostinho Neto. He died in Moscow, at the operating bed, in 79. Dos Santos has been there since 79. And Angola has a lot of oil and has been through a devastating civil war between the MPLA and UNITA. In Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni has been there since 1985, after he overthrew, the government of General Okello. He's been in power. Mugabe has been there since 1980, since he took over, from Ian Smith in Zimbabwe, which was at that time called, Rhodesia. In Chad, President Idris Deby has been there since 1991. In Eritrea, President Afwerki has been there since 1993. In Ethiopia, President Meles Zenawi has been there since 1991, after the overthrow of President Mengistu of Ethiopia. In Sudan, President Omar Hassan el-Bashir has been there since 1989, when he overthrew the government of Sadiq el-Mahdi, a democratically elected government, of President el-Mahdi. In Gambia, Yahya Jammeh has been there since 1994, when he overthrew President Jawara's democratically elected government. Now he calls himself a doctor of curing AIDS. That's what he says he's doing now. He can cure AIDS. That's correct. In Ivory Coast, we still have a problem. Gbagbo has been there since 2009, and then last year, he lost an election that was, adjudged, free and fair to Alassane Ouattara. But Gbagbo insists that he's the legitimate president, because Ouattara, in his own opinion, is not a citizen of Ivory Coast, and therefore cannot be president. And that's really the problem you're having now in that country. And on King Mswati in Swaziland has been, king there since 1986. So most, in talk of Cameroon, Paul Biya has been there since 1982, since he took over from President Ahidjo of Cameroon. So all these leaders, are trembling now with what is happening in Libya. And they know now with the international community watching, they can just start shooting their citizens anywhere they like. That's what motivated the UN to impose a no-fly zone. So they know it might happen to them. If their people come out now and tell them it's time to go, they might be scared of turning the guns on them. Because that's why people stay away from coming to demonstrate, because they know those leaders will shoot at them without thinking twice. It has happened so many times. Look at in Burkina Faso, Blaise Compaoré has been there since '87, and whenever people come out to demonstrate, they are gunned down. Then he came to power, participating in planning and executing his own best friend, Thomas Sankara, who was president. And he's been there since '87, shows no sign of going. In Congo-Brazzaville, Sassou Nguesso, has been there since '91, really. Yeah, he has been president, left, came back again in '97 through a civil war, and still in power and shows no sign of leaving. So this is what you have all over that continent now. So it's very important, that what is happening in Libya, happening in the rest of Africa. And what the problem is this: a lot of those regimes in Africa, the U.S. government says they are our friends. Okay, that's a mistake again. But the average African doesn't see it that way. Take, for example, Obiang in Equatorial Guinea. Yeah, the last time Condoleezza Rice went over there and said, oh yes, Obiang is a good ally of the United States. But everybody knows that Obiang has bankrupted the country, and not only that, has siphoned most of the funds to be used for development. Equatorial Guinea has more oil, almost as much as Kuwait, but with a population of about 900,000 people. Half of the people in that country don't have shoes, can't go to school, but oil is gushing. And the dictator doesn't, want anybody to criticize him. He wins elections by 99.9%. Up to today, okay, the last election was 99.9%. That's the margin. Okay, so those kind of people, people would think, hey, the State Department and the White House has to be against those kind of dictators, because when they go, the investments we have there will still be there to be protected. Okay, the oil in Equatorial Guinea does not, exactly.
It's just there.
It's there. It doesn't belong to Obiang. Okay, when he leaves, we will still have access to that oil, regardless of who's in power. So why should we be supporting these dictators? You say because of our oil interest. That oil will be there when they leave. Okay, we're not going to be supporting dictatorship.
They will have greater access to it.
Exactly, because the people will be happy. Yeah, that's right. Because if you help them get rid of these folks. Right now, people there are suppressed. A lot of anger going through all these countries because they see the leaders sitting there, doing nothing, exploiting their resources for their own personal aggrandizement and their families, and people are suffering. So why should we be supporting Dos Santos up to now in Angola because of the oil? When he goes, the oil will be there. NATO was there before. NATO died, Dos Santos took over, the oil is still there. It's still there. Okay, why should we be supporting a dictator in Chad, Idris Deby, because of the oil in Chad? If Idris Deby goes, the oil will be still there, and we will still have access to it. So we have to have an even-handed approach, to dealing with dictators all over the world. It wouldn't be the way, case-by-case basis, as we, do right now. For example, in Bahrain, people are saying, okay, hey, the Bahraini government is shooting civilians too. It's been on TV. Why can't we do the same, the way we are talking about Libya? It's the same thing. The difference is that they're not using warplanes, and they are not armed. But the Bahraini government is shooting people on the streets.
But we've got an interest, we think.
Yeah, because we have our 5th fleet based in Bahrain.
And like nobody else can keep us there with...
That's correct. And Saudi Arabia has come in now with about 1,000 soldiers to support them with our tacit approval. And that's what we are saying. We don't want that kind of double standard in Africa. Those dictators who've been there for long, suppressing their people, need to go.
Dr. Madu, I think that we've had you on many occasions and always about the problems in Africa. And we've always talked about, as we end this show for today, We've always talked about the dictators and et cetera. But I think that what you're telling us now, that this just might be the twilight of the dictators, that it just might be time that the people are rising up. They might not be rising up in Africa now, but the stage has been set for them to do so.
Absolutely.
Of course, let me thank you for coming by and giving us that. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.